Hello, hello. It is Sunday. I'm sitting here with Aiyana. You can see her. Today she is 1 month old, which is crazy. It's crazy to think that we have been living in a hospital for 1 month and the fact that she's made it to 1 month. Okay, so I never know where to look. Do I look down here? Do I look up there? So bear with me. But yeah, so she is 1 month old today on the dot at 2:38 this morning. So I wanted to give you all a 1 month update of what's been going on. I haven't posted a video in a while, and I do post on our Instagram at all for them, but I'm not as consistent when stuff gets a little crazy. But I'm here in our NICU and at the San Antonio Children's Hospital. We're still here. And basically, we had quite the setback last week, but right now she is stable and kind of back to a baseline, like basics baseline. So right now she's on room air. She has no breathing support of any kind. She does have her NG tube still in. You can see that coming out her nose. And she is being fed breast milk exclusively. We are no longer fortifying. And I'll get into that in a minute. She had a central PICC line in, but it was leaking. So that's been taken out. So you can't see it, but there's just a little bandage there now because it was in her jugular. And her IVs have been taken out. She's off antibiotics, off all IV fluids. She's off supplements right now. The only thing that she does have going is the breast milk feeds and heart medications. So the main issue with her heart is that she is in heart failure. She has been in heart failure almost since she's been born. She started showing signs immediately upon being delivered that she was having heart issues. And I haven't really talked too much about her birth, but I posted a little bit on our Instagram, quick bit about her story. But she came out when she was delivered, and they put her on my chest, and she was kind of moving, very weak cry, and then she just stopped breathing, turned like purple blue, stopped moving. She like passed away. And so they took her and quickly took her over to the bed next to mine and started working on her, resuscitating her. They didn't have to do, we said no intubation with our orders, so they didn't have to intubate her or anything like that, but they did all the regular suctioning and rubbing, and they gave her oxygen, and I honestly don't know everything else. It's kind of a blur, and I was crying and holding my breath and praying. So the whole thing went by in a flash of a second. But then you heard her cry, and everybody was crying in that room. Everyone was so happy that she was alive and making sounds. She immediately got pink again, and then they had her up to a pulse ox. They put that on so we could watch her oxygen saturations and heart rate and respiratory rate. And she immediately, all her vitals shot back up to normal. And so they brought her back over, and she didn't need any further oxygen support and hasn't needed any since then. But yesterday, for the first time, she was having issues with her saturations. Her oxygen was really low. It was kind of like going all over the place. Her heart rate was much higher than normal, and her respiratory rate was super low, and then it would shoot up really high, and then it would go back really low. So it was just a few hours of like this weird situation that we didn't know what was going on, and we tried different positioning and different things, and we just couldn't figure out, was like the machine malfunctioning or is she really having an issue? We honestly don't know. She seems better today. At one point yesterday when I was holding her and that stuff was going on, her color did change, and that's the biggest indicator. she kind of went like grayish colored and then came back really quick. So we just have to keep an eye on that. Trisomy kids do have issues with breathing in general. So we just have to kind of see what happens. And sometimes these things develop, out of nowhere, and other times they are like that from the start and just stay that way. So we just have to kind of see what happens. But she is doing better today. So just like a quick synopsis of what's been going on. So kind of working backwards from yesterday. Basically, we had a care conference with all the doctors here because last week she had 103.5 fever out of nowhere. The days leading up to that fever, she had blood in her stools, blood in her tube differentials, which is when they pull up the fluid just to see if she's tolerating the feeds, digesting it properly. There was blood in that liquid that's in her stomach. So they did a bunch of tests on her. They did viral, blood, urine, and they did a spinal tap to test meningitis. So they tested hundreds of common colds and other issues, viruses, different things. Everything came back negative. So she immediately was taken off feeds. She wasn't fed for 2 days. She was put on antibiotics for those 2 days as well. And I think we did not do oxygen. I'm trying to remember everything. But basically we were just trying to figure out what the heck was going on because she just wasn't doing well. Her color was really bad. Her blood cell count went like plummeted. She was like white as paper. And so we just watched her. All the tests came back negative, and then eventually she just kind of fixed herself. That's when they started TPN fluids. They started some supplements, and then they also had to place the PICC line because her veins just kept blowing over and over and over. So that was pretty rough. But eventually she pulled out of it. Fever went down, stayed down. She started regulating her body temperature again well. Slowly over the last weekend, we got her feeds back down. Her feeds started again, and her TPN fluids were stopped yesterday. So basically now we're back to a baseline. And at the care conference on Monday of this week, it was kind of to go over all of this stuff and talk about moving forward. Because originally we were supposed to discharge last week. And that clearly isn't happening. So at that meeting, it was a little bit contentious, but we kind of worked through it. They basically were very concerned about discharging her, but didn't really want to tell us. And we're trying to make it happen because they knew how important it was to us to go back to the valley, and then we were going to move to Arizona in a month or two. But the valley doesn't have all the care that she needs. It wouldn't have been best suited for her. So basically in that meeting, they expressed their extreme concern about her going back there and really said that they didn't feel like it was in her best interest. And so as hard as that was to hear, we had to just go along with it. So then we talked about what's the plan moving forward. I expressed my concern over how aggressive things have been in terms of multiple times a day changes to feeds and all of her different medications and different stuff. So I asked them to kind of pare things back and let's go back to establishing a stable baseline with her, and slow and steady is the theme. Start to address issues and concerns, but not on a multiple times a day basis. So where we ended up was with feeds. We're stopping all bottle feeds for now to minimize any more weight loss. And since I've asked them to stop bottle feeds, she has not lost any weight. She just keeps gaining. She's now at 21, I think she's 2150 grams. I can't remember. Or 2140. And she's now only being fed breast milk. I asked them to stop formula, also to stop human milk fortifier, and to stop the MCT oil. They were also going to start a Bennett protein. I asked them not to do that as well. So it just said, let's focus on the breast milk. Let's focus on tube feeding. She has great oral feeding skills, and I'm hoping that, you know, as long as we use a pacifier when we feed and stuff like that, that we will maintain that and be able to restart it again. But I just don't want them to become, well, they were becoming detrimental. It was kind of like depleting the purpose of feeding her, only to lose more weight again while you were eating, because her heart was working so hard. She'd be out of breath. You could visibly see like her chest just going fast, and she would kind of sit there like she was trying to catch her breath again, and that wasn't right. Her heart, so she was on multiple heart medications at the time that all this kind of went to crap last week. She was on Lasix multiple times a day, which is a diuretic. And the whole point with her heart is that she has a very, they call it gigantic, very, very large VSD in the lower chamber. And then she has a pulmonary return issue on the upper part, which kind of creates another pseudo hole. She also has a couple veins that are open. She has some thickening in her valves, and she has an aortic overcompensation because of the big VSD, so the aorta has to go around it. And all that this does is creates fluid just kind of going in and out of these holes and into the lungs, and things are just not functioning properly. And it creates wet lungs, which makes her heart have to work even harder. So they've said it multiple times. She is in heart failure. She will need surgery to repair the VSD. They don't believe that it will close itself. She also has a PDA, I think is what it is, but that they believe will start to close itself. So that one should be fine, but the rest of it, no. So she was on Lasix multiple times a day. She was also on Diurel, which is another diuretic, but it's a much more aggressive diuretic. And it usually is paired with Lasix when Lasix starts to become more, just not working as well as it should. They talked about other medications, but it just wasn't working. So now she's on Lasix three times a day. And she is also on a new one called aldactone, which is a very weak diuretic, but why we use that instead of something else is because it doesn't deplete potassium. And the Diurel paired with the Lasix are very electrolyte depleting of everything. Your sodium, your potassium, I mean everything. They have to test her electrolytes every single day to make sure that we aren't creating like an unstable environment for her, and then we have to supplement accordingly. So her biggest issue was with the potassium, and we were having to supplement all the time with that and could not get it to stay up. So the aldactone was what they just added to the Lasix. So she's on Lasix 3 times and aldactone once a day right now. And so far, I think we're doing pretty good. Her potassium was actually higher than it should have been, so now we have to watch that the opposite effect doesn't happen, that she doesn't start storing potassium, because that can be dangerous as well. So this whole thing is like this tricky little balance of just kind of tinkering with all these different things, trying to get everything right. We haven't found what right, quote unquote, right is yet, but we're still working on it. And the goal is to get her to gain weight and get her heart managed with the medications and different things so that we can get her to heart surgery. And the most ideal time to do heart surgery is 3 to 6 months, of age. And that's because the weight will be bigger. She'll be able to tolerate open heart surgery and anesthesia and the recovery. And then also any issues with the heart will have all kind of come into play. The issues will be further along, and they say it's better to repair a heart that has, it is in more failure, I guess is kind of how they described it. But in leading up to that point, I don't know if we're going to make it to the 3 to 6 month mark, honestly. But they said that she may need to do a stopgap procedure, which they call banding, where they put a band around the heart to help as well. And sometimes that can be used in place of heart surgery because it worked so well for some patients. They just won't need surgery for a long time. So we will just have to wait and see what she's going to tell us that she needs. They don't feel comfortable doing either right now because of her weight. She is not even at her birth weight yet. She was 414 when she was born, and now she's getting close. I think she's 410 right now. We were kind of trying to regain the weight that she lost while she was sick last week. Trying to think of what else. Temperament-wise, she's really calm. She's such a calm baby. It's crazy compared to Leilani, who was so colicky and cranky and just needed touching and holding all day long. Aiyana loves to be held, obviously. I mean, what baby doesn't? But for being in a hospital and being poked and monitored every 3 hours and unswaddled and, you know, all these different things, and not having someone to hold you 24/7 every day, she's doing so well. It's pretty amazing. And she just sleeps a lot. And I think that's just because her heart and everything, her body's conserving energy. But we do get these moments of awake playtime with her where she's just looking around. You talk to her and she looks at you. She responds to sounds. She passes all the different developmental tests so far. They're really surprised by her just ability to do all these different things. Her muscle tone is a little weak, but she's very good with her movements. Her hands, she does like to keep closed, but she does open them quite frequently, and we work on them even more with the therapist. And oral feeding skills are good. She cues when she's hungry. She takes a pacifier. All those kinds of things. She sucks the bottle, was able to take the milk out. Breastfeeding, she wasn't able to express it, but we honestly haven't really tried too much because that was very upsetting to her, and just more energy expansion, which we don't need. We don't need her to lose more weight. So right now we're just kind of waiting to see what's going to happen with her. I guess one thing I didn't talk about was her tube. I posted about this on our Instagram, but we decided to not do a G-tube for now. The reasons that we decided that, even though the doctors were urging us to place a G-tube for weight gain and for safety, is because of her ability to orally feed. I just don't feel like it's necessary to put her into a surgery that could cause other risks or make things more unstable. If she's showing us that she could potentially feed and does well with the NG feed. She does really well tolerating all of the feeds for it. So right now we're sticking with the NG tube. If she ends up getting discharged and going home, we started training on that, so I would be placing it and doing feeds with the pump and all that kind of stuff. And I think that's pretty much where we're at right now. So our next step is to figure out moving to Arizona, which means closing up the house and life in South Texas. She will have to stay here in San Antonio while all of that happens, which I'm really not happy about. I don't want to leave her alone for any period of time. So I just don't know how that's going to work out, but I can't clone myself and be in multiple places at once. So that's the tricky part. And if her dad has to go back to work, which I believe is going to be soon, we will no longer be able to split our time between the two kids, which is what we've been doing. So he'll take Leilani in the morning while I'm here with Aiyana, and then we switch at Leilani's nap time. He'll come with Aiyana and spend the rest of the day and night with her, and then I'll be with Leilani and get her down for bed and stay with her at night in the Ronald McDonald house. He's staying at a hotel down the street, and Aiyana's here in the NICU, and so we just kind of rotate our time around. And the problem is that the NICU does not allow kids under 5. So Leilani has not seen Aiyana since the first day she was born, which is really sad. But we show her photos and videos, and she does know, she says her name, which is pretty cute. But it just makes the management of all this really hard because the Ronald McDonald House has rules about who can watch kids in there. They have to be a registered family member. And we don't have any friends or family here in San Antonio. So I have nobody to step in and help with Leilani if I have to be in the NICU, and Leilani can't be in the NICU with me. So it also is an issue with Leilani of just the consistency and all the change that's been going on. It's been affecting her pretty badly. Lots of tantrums. She got really bad there for a little bit when she wasn't staying with me. She was with her dad, and she just was too sad being away. So I took her back, and she's staying with me now. And I think that's helped a lot. Her sleep was really bad, completely disrupted. We're starting to get baby steps towards getting it better again. But, you know, the situation's hard on everybody, and especially on kids who don't understand and can't communicate fully yet. So doing our best to try and keep things consistent. I just don't know how we're going to do this if he goes back to work or we have to go pack and move and different things like that. So in order for us to move to Arizona, Aiyana will be transferred inpatient. So I believe she'd have to take another air transport flight, which is how she got to San Antonio. She's a month old and she's already flown once and is going to probably fly again within the next 2 months. So it's pretty crazy. But that will be how we'll get to Phoenix. She will be at Phoenix Children's, which they've expressed their acceptance of her trisomy condition, her heart condition, and are willing to do a surgery as well. So that should work out better, especially for visitation for Leilani and getting out of South Texas and just getting into more of a normal living situation. And then we will also be looking at getting closer to California. So the doctor's here for an update, so I'm gonna get going. I'll post again soon. Thanks.